The call lasted 4 minutes. By the end of it, my entire family went silent. My wife, Sandra, had spent 3 weeks telling everyone I was a controlling, abusive husband who drove her away. One phone call destroyed every lie she had built. My name is Damon Pina. I am a 42-year-old corporate litigation attorney. I argue cases worth millions. I read people for a living. I know when someone is lying. And the moment Sandra stood in my mother's living room and called me a monster, I had already prepared everything I needed to prove she was the real predator in this marriage. Sandra made her move on a Tuesday. I was at the office when my phone exploded. Missed calls from my mother, my brother, my aunt, even my cousin in Houston. I did not panic. My hands were steady. But inside, something cold and heavy settled in my chest. She had moved fast. Faster than I expected. I had underestimated her timing, not her motive. I already knew what she was. I had known for 6 weeks. I sat at my desk, closed my laptop, and made one decision. I would not call anyone back. Not yet. My brother Theo sent a text. It said, "Damon, what did you do to her?" She was crying. Mom is devastated. I stared at that message for a long time. My jaw tightened. My brother had never once asked Sandra what she did. Not once. I typed back 3 words, "Wait for me." Then I opened the file on my second laptop. The one Sandra did not know existed. The one I had been building quietly, carefully, every single night for 6 weeks. It was 43 pages long. And it had a name, Operation Blank Slate. Here is what Sandra did not know. 3 months ago, I found a transfer. $11,000 moved from our joint account to a name I did not recognize. I said nothing. I hired a private investigator instead. His name was Ray. Ray was expensive. Ray was also very, very good. Within 2 weeks, he handed me a folder. Inside that folder was the beginning of Sandra's real story. She had a man. His name was Troy Allison. Troy was not just her lover. Troy was also the reason our savings had a slow, quiet leak for 8 months. Troy Allison presented himself as a real estate developer. He had a website, business cards, and a LinkedIn profile with 900 connections. He wore good shoes. He talked like money. But Ray pulled his records. Troy Allison had 2 fraud convictions in Georgia. He had never developed a single property. He was a con artist. And Sandra, my wife of 9 years, had been funneling our money to him. Was she a victim or a partner? Ray kept digging. What he found next made my blood run cold and my mind go completely, surgically calm. Sandra was not a victim. She and Troy had a joint account in her maiden name. Opened 14 months ago. The balance when Ray found it was $61,000. Most of it came from us. From me. I sat with that information for 4 days. I did not confront her. I did not change my behavior. I cooked dinner. I asked about her day. I watched her lie to my face with a smile. And every night, I added more to the file. People like Sandra count on emotion. They expect you to explode. Exploding was the one thing I refused to do. The next piece came from an unlikely place. Our home security system. Sandra thought I used it to monitor the front door and the garage. I did. But I also had an audio-enabled device in the living room. Fully legal in our state. One-party consent. I had checked the law first. On a Wednesday night 3 weeks before she ran to my family, I captured a phone call. Sandra, on the couch, laughing, telling Troy the plan. She said, "Once I paint him as the abuser, the divorce judge will give me the house and half his pension. Just hold tight." I saved that file in 4 separate locations. The house. She wanted the house. That was the centerpiece of her plan. What Sandra never fully investigated, despite living there for 6 years, was the deed. The house was not in both our names. It was in mine alone. I had purchased it 14 months before we married. I had never added her to the title. Not out of suspicion at the time. Simply because we never got around to it. Now, that bureaucratic delay was a wall she was about to run straight into. I printed the deed. I put it in a separate folder. Red tab. It sat on top of everything else. I contacted my attorney, Grace O'Yelleran. She was sharp, quiet, and ruthless in courtrooms. I laid everything on her desk. She read for 20 minutes without speaking. Then she looked up and said, "Damon, she has no idea what she walked into." I said nothing. Grace pulled out a legal pad and started writing. We had two goals. First, protect every asset. Second, expose every lie, in the right order, at the right time. Grace called it sequencing. I called it what it was. Hunting. The family gathering was Sandra's idea. She called it a family conversation. She invited my mother, both my brothers, my aunt, and 3 cousins to my mother's house. She did not tell me. My mother did, accidentally, in a text meant for Theo. Sandra planned to ambush me with an audience. She thought shame would keep me quiet. She thought I would show up and absorb it. I confirmed with my mother that I would be there. Then I made one additional arrangement. I asked Grace to be on standby. Phone charged. Ready. I walked into my mother's house at 6:14 p.m. Sandra was already seated. She had dressed carefully. Soft colors. Minimal makeup. She looked like someone who had been through pain. She had rehearsed this. I could see it in the way she sat, slightly forward, hands folded. My family looked at me like I was the defendant. I felt the heat of it. My pulse jumped once. Then I locked it down. I sat across from her, set my phone face down on the table, and said nothing. Sandra began to speak. I let her go. She talked for 11 minutes. She said I was emotionally cold, that I controlled her spending, that I monitored her movements, that she had been suffocating for years. She cried twice. Real tears, I noticed, but placed perfectly. My mother reached over and held her hand. My brother Theo shook his head slowly and looked at me with something close to disgust. My aunt said, "Damon, how could you?" I looked around the table. Then I looked at Sandra. And I smiled. Not wide. Just enough. Her eyes flickered. She saw something she did not expect. She saw calm. I picked up my phone. I said, "Before anyone says anything else, I want to play something." Theo said, "Damon, this isn't the time for..." I pressed play. Sandra's voice filled the room. Her actual voice. Laughing. Relaxed. Saying Troy's name. Saying the word abuser like a strategy, not a truth. Saying the house like a prize. The room went completely still. My mother's hand slowly pulled back from Sandra's. Sandra's face drained of color in real time. I watched it happen. I had waited 6 weeks to watch it happen. Sandra stood up. Her chair scraped back hard. She said, "That's doctored. That's not real." Her voice cracked on the last word. Theo looked at her. He was a straight man. He did not like dishonesty. He said slowly, "Sandra, that was your voice." She said, "He manipulated it." I said, "With what?" "You were sitting on our couch. Our legally recorded couch." I slid a 1-page summary across the table. Ray's findings. The joint account. The 61,000. Troy Ellison's fraud convictions. My aunt picked it up. Her hands were shaking. Sandra tried a different angle. She looked at my mother and said, "He's twisting everything. This is what he does. This is exactly what I was talking about." My mother looked at Sandra for a long moment. Then she looked at me. She was 67 years old. She had survived a lot. She was not a foolish woman. She said quietly, "Sandra, whose name is on the account in Georgia?" Sandra said nothing. My mother said, "Whose name?" The silence stretched. Theo put his head in his hands. That was microwin number 2. I made the call at 7:02 p.m. I put Grace on speaker. She introduced herself as my attorney. She informed Sandra, clearly and without drama, that divorce papers had already been filed that morning. She outlined the fraud claim. She mentioned Troy Ellison by full name. She noted the recorded audio was admissible. She explained that the house, deed recorded in my name alone, was not a marital asset under state law. Sandra interrupted twice. Grace did not raise her voice once. She simply continued. When Grace finished, Sandra sat back down. Slowly, like the air had left her. Sandra looked at me with something I had not seen on her face before. Not anger. Fear. Real fear. She said, "You planned all of this." I said, "You planned first." She said, "I'll fight it." I said, "With what money, Sandra?" The joint account is frozen as of this morning. The Georgia account has been flagged for fraud investigation. Troy Ellison was picked up for questioning in Atlanta 2 hours ago. That last part made her go completely white. She had not known about Troy. I had saved that detail specifically for this moment. Theo stood up. He walked around the table and stopped in front of Sandra. He was not angry. He was worse. He was disappointed. He said, "You sat in this house and made us believe he hurt you." Sandra started to speak. He held up one hand. He said, "Don't." He walked to where I was sitting and put his hand on my shoulder once. Then he left the room. My aunt folded the summary paper and put it in her purse without a word. Sandra was now sitting alone on her side of the table. Completely alone. My mother asked Sandra to leave. She said it gently. She said it once. Sandra looked around for an ally. There was no one left. She picked up her bag. Her hands were unsteady. She walked to the door and stopped. She turned and said, "You'll regret this." I said, "I already have everything I need." She left. The door closed. My mother sat down beside me and was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm sorry I doubted you." I said, "You didn't know." She nodded. That was enough. The divorce proceedings took 9 weeks. Sandra hired an attorney who discovered, piece by piece, that every angle she had planned was already blocked. The house claim was dismissed in the first hearing. The abuse narrative collapsed when Grace presented the audio and the fraud documentation. Sandra's attorney pushed for spousal support. Grace presented 8 months of financial withdrawals traced directly to Troy Ellison's operation. The judge reviewed for 3 minutes. Then he denied it. Sandra's attorney requested a recess. He came back and advised Sandra to settle. She had no leverage left. None. Troy Ellison was charged with 3 counts of wire fraud. A separate civil suit linked Sandra to the scheme. She was not charged criminally, but the civil exposure was enough. The Georgia account was seized. $61,000, gone. The investigators found 2 other women Troy had worked with in similar setups. Sandra's name appeared in the documentation as a knowing participant in at least one prior case. Her attorney stopped returning her calls 2 days after that filing hit the court record. She was on her own and had nothing left to fight with. The settlement was signed on a Thursday morning. Sandra received nothing from the house. No claim on my pension. A small split of one joint account that had less than $4,000 in it by the time the fraud recovery process concluded. She signed without looking up. Her hand moved across the paper fast, like she wanted it over. Grace slid the documents to me. I signed each page slowly and clearly. When it was done, Grace gathered the files. She looked at Sandra's attorney and said simply, "We're finished here." And we were. I drove home alone. I walked into the house. The same house Sandra had planned to take. I stood in the hallway for a moment. It was quiet. No rage. No celebration. Just silence and the knowledge that every move had landed exactly where it was supposed to. I changed my clothes. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table with an empty house around me and an empty file folder in front of me. 43 pages, now unnecessary. I closed it. I did not feel like a winner. I felt like a man who had done what needed to be done. Sandra called me once, 2 weeks after the signing. I did not answer. She left a voicemail. I did not listen to it. I had Grace's office send a formal cease contact notice the next day. I never heard from her again after that. Troy Ellison took a plea deal. 18 months. The women he had defrauded filed a joint civil suit that would follow him long after he was released. The whole structure Sandra had built, the lies, the lover, the plan to take everything, had collapsed completely. Not from luck. From preparation. From patience. From choosing the right moment to strike. Because remember, emotion is just noise. A plan is a finish line. Sandra bet on my silence and my shame. She lost both bets before she even made them. The moment she decided to turn my family against me, I had already built the case that would undo her. She never saw it coming because she never believed I was watching. I was always watching. If you enjoyed watching this justice unfold, please like the video and leave a comment. And if you haven't subscribed to Revenge with Monroe yet, hit that notification bell so you never miss the next move. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.